Our next speaker tonight, and I will not filibuster because she has a plane to catch, is Danielle Pletka, who is the Senior Vice President for Foreign and Defense Policy at the American Enterprise Institute in Washington. Now, AEI, as you all know, is the leading voice for promoting the free enterprise system, as well as a strong moral foreign policy based on freedom and democracy. Danny, as we all call her, was a key part of the Helms Senate family. As a senior professional staff member for Near East and South Asia Affairs for the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, a post she held for, I believe, 10 years. The Foreign Relations Committee, under Senator Helms' leadership, chairmanship, once again became the voice for American foreign policy, due in part to the incredible team the Senator and, yes, Admiral Bud Nance assembled, and Danny was one of our stars. Danny is widely published in the so-called leading newspapers across the country. She's also a regular on Meet the Press, and you all may have seen her, and please tune in. It is timely that we have Danny with us tonight in the wake of our withdrawal from the Iran deal. She has rightly posed the question, what's next? And I'm sure she'll elaborate on that in her remarks. So I'm thrilled to welcome my friend and former colleague to North Carolina, Danny Pletka.
Good evening, everybody. Okay, first of all, please eat. You've got salad in front of you. I just ate all the cheese bits off mine, but it's delicious. So, and it won't offend me. I can't even hear your forks and knives. So eat. Thank you so much, Jimmy. When you use the word family, it is absolutely true. You know, the Helms family really was a family. The personal staff, the committee staff, we were in the minority, we were in the majority, but we all look back on that as some of the happiest professional times of our lives. And so I'm really delighted to be here. It's just an honor to address the Jesse Helms Center, and I'm so happy that the Pope Foundation is here. John, I can't believe how long we've known each other. I'm embarrassed a little bit, actually, at how long we've known each other, but you've done an amazing job with the Helms Center. You really have. No, he deserves a round of applause. But you're not here to hear me flatter everybody as much as I could pretty much go around each table and pick out somebody who I remember from the good old days and reminisce and potentially embarrass them and myself. But instead, let's talk a little bit about national security, which is why I'm here today. Senator Tillis did a great job in laying out some of the issues that confront us. But I had a cheat sheet. John said, well, you're coming down, you're going to talk to us. You need to be brief because you're between the senator and dinner, and there's no wine being served, so really brief. But he laid out some questions for me, and I thought I would try to answer them as best I can, with a little help maybe from Jesse Helms. So he asked me, how can we best defend ourselves? And the answer to that is by knowing who we are and what we stand for. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. What do we stand for? We stand for freedom. We stand for democratic capitalism. We stand for human dignity and all that entails. And that means religious freedom. It means political freedom. It means human rights. It means all of the things that we know that America has stood for, and often alone, often without other allies, but stood proudly for around the world. So to help me a little bit, and I'm going to pull up my phone here because what would a modern woman be without her telephone? Because I have the quote here that I want to read to you from Senator Helms. Okay. U.S. policies should isolate terrorist regimes like Iran, Iraq, Libya, Syria, and Cuba. U.S. aid should not go to countries that commit genocide, harbor war criminals, support terrorism, or export illegal drugs that poison American children. Lethal weapons should not be sold to violent regimes in Nigeria or Sudan. Assets of drug traffickers should be seized Imports from Chinese companies that use prison slave labor should be banned, and government procurement contracts should not be given to foreign companies that sell dangerous technologies to terrorist states. There should be sanctions on companies and governments that proliferate nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons, and countries that murder women and children and pile them into mass graves. America should not hesitate for 1 second to place a cost on these reprehensible acts and to restrain those who would conduct business with the perpetrators of such heinous crimes. Can you believe he wrote that in Foreign Affairs in 1999? It's amazing to me. It's almost 20 years ago, and it is as if he wrote it yesterday. That tells you a lot about the problems and the continuity of challenges that we face in foreign policy, but it also tells you, because it resonates so deeply with us, about how right he was, about how prescient he was, about standing up for the things we care about around the world. So what does that mean for us, for the challenges that we face vis-a-vis China, vis-a-vis Russia, vis-a-vis Iran, what we call revisionist states? Turkey is one of them as well. These are countries who are nostalgic about the empires they once had, the Russian Empire, the Chinese Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and the Persian Empire. It means for us pushing back, not just accepting the encroachments on our sovereignty. And when I say encroachments on our sovereignty, by the way, it's important to think about the kinds of things that we used not to think about in the old days as encroachments. What I mean is, cybercrime. I mean the Chinese government stealing personnel files for hundreds of thousands of American government personnel, myself included. It means Russia interfering in our elections. It means the kinds of things that we never contemplated that people can do from the comfort of their own capitals, while they interfere in our government, in the conduct of our national business. Those are encroachments on our sovereignty. It means sanctions. It means pushing back. It means exacting a price for those countries. And when you think about the president's withdrawal from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, we call it the Iran deal, this week, you should think about it in that context. There are reasons to argue with the withdrawal. There are reasons to articulate that suggest that it wasn't the best idea. On the other hand, I think that the president has made very clear that he looked back at the terms of the deal that Barack Obama and John Kerry signed with the government of Iran and said, this isn't serving the American people. But not the American people, it's not serving our global interests. The fact that we had to, 3 years ago, lift sanctions on the government of Iran for doing all the things that I just listed from that 1999 article, stuck in his craw. And we are going to reimpose those sanctions. And that may not result in the world loving us, and it may not result in rounds of applause everywhere in Washington, but it may actually result in better national security for the American people. I sure hope so. But that requires real leadership. And sometimes leadership doesn't involve compromise, and sometimes it does, but you've got to stand up for what you believe in. What does America first look like? When we use those words, you can see me frown every time. I can't stand that expression. It reminds me of World War II. It reminds me of Father Coughlin. It reminds me of Charles Lindbergh. It reminds me of a lot of nasty people. But there is a reason to put the American people first. There is a reason to put our national interests first. And that should have a lot of resonance with all of us. All of our policies should be about the safety and security of the American people. When we argue often at the American Enterprise Institute about the need to invest in our defense budget, one of the things that we make clear is that in our Constitution, there's not a lot of talk about taxes. There's not a lot of talk about schools. There's not a lot of talk about single-payer health care. There is a lot of talk about national security and about the prime role of the President of the United States defending the national security of the American people. And that's the right way to think about putting the American people first. What does ensuring the prosperity and security of the American people require? It requires a set of policies that don't kick the can down the road, I personally can't believe that I'm standing before you today and we are still in the national media and in foreign policy talking about the problem of North Korea's nuclear weapons. Okay. We were working on this when I was on Capitol Hill and I was a lot younger. They didn't have all the nuclear weapons they have today, and this is the legacy of successive presidents failing to address the challenge. So the fact that we have someone who's actually out there doing that and may actually move this ball forward is a responsible act. I don't know if we're going to win. I don't know if we're going to get the outcomes we want, but it is something to applaud because we have had successive presidents who have kicked this can down the road. The same goes for Iran. And the same goes, and this is perhaps where some people differ with me, including people who have similar ideology to me. That means standing up for people who can't help themselves. That means looking at the country of Syria and seeing 500,000 dead people, men, women, and children, killed by barrel bombs, killed by chemical weapons, killed by the Iranians, killed by the Russians, and actually caring about their fate. It doesn't always follow that when we care about the fate of foreign peoples, that we immediately must go to war on their behalf. But what we learned under Ronald Reagan, and a principle that I know that Jesse Helms believed in, was helping people help themselves. And that's why I believe that it should be the policy of the United States to support people who are fighting for their own freedom in every way we can. That doesn't kick the can down the road. That doesn't send American troops. What it does is it helps people help themselves. It is always in our interest to see a more peaceful world, always. And I learned that at the knee of the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and I believe it firmly to this day. There's another problem we face out there, and that is the problem of Islamist extremism. John wrote a note, and he asked me, are the jihadis winning? And what I really wanted to say was no. But the answer is they are. And this is another case in which we're not helping either ourselves or people who want to help us. If you look at what's going on in the Middle East, and that's my part of the world, that's what I worked on when I was at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, what you see is a disease, an illness that is spread throughout the region. And when our president says, we have defeated ISIS, let me tell you, people forget what ISIS is. Okay? The Islamic State, or the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, whatever it is they want to call themselves, they used to have a different name. They used to be called Al-Qaeda in Iraq. The leader of ISIS is the fourth leader of Al-Qaeda in Iraq. These guys come back. They come back again and again and again. And you know what we don't talk about? We don't talk enough about Al-Qaeda. But you know what happens when we don't talk about them? They spread. They prosper. They're doing well. They are in Yemen. They are in Syria. They are in Sinai, they are in Libya, they are in, I could keep going for a while here. They are in Southeast Asia, they are spreading throughout the Horn of Africa, and they are using this time that we are focusing on ISIS to deepen their roots in these countries, to dominate more and more territory, and they are going to threaten us. I wish I had a piece of good news for you, but that's something we all need to worry about a lot. And so when people say the problems of the Middle East are the problems of the Middle East, my answer is no, they're not. These are our problems, just like the problems of Afghanistan weren't the problems of Afghanistan, they were our problems. And as long as we're able to provide leadership, as long as we're able to help people who want to fight them, as long as we're willing to stand up for the principles that we hold dear, we will actually be able to defeat this menace. And not just defeat it and run away and have to go back again in 5 years and then pretend we've defeated it and run away, but defeated it for once and for all. And the way to do that is to help people embrace the values that we hold dear and stand up for them and not be embarrassed. I hated to hear it when our president said a few years ago that, our values, we didn't want to impose our values on others, implying somehow that they weren't better. They are better, and I'm not embarrassed to say so. Our values are our greatest strength. They really are. They're what makes this country great. This is, it makes my voice choke up because y'all don't know this. See, I said it. I promised I'd get a y'all in there somewhere. Y'all don't know this. But when I went to work for the Senate Foreign Relations Committee in 1992, I was an Australian citizen. And I became an American to work for the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and I took the oath, and I'm such a proud American. And so whenever I talk about the values that we hold dear, what makes this country great, what our men and women sacrifice every day to stand up for those values, for our freedoms, for the things that matter in this world, it gives me a great joy. It really does. This is what matters in foreign policy. This is what matters in everything. This is what matters in politics. Because Jesse Helms knew from the top of his head to the bottom of his toes, the world is a better place when we believe in those values, when we stand up for those values, and when we lead. That's it. Go for your salad. Thank you all so much.